Ned is featured in a Harvard case study. What you glorified through that was something that people don't really believe in, which is the site speed stuff. So I'll let you explain it. What is that case study about, and why is it such a big polarizing discussion?
If I go to Obby right now, and I've never been there, and the homepage is a little slow to load, or the image is below the folder a little slow to load, it actually has, from a correlation perspective, zero impact. And everybody obsesses about this constantly, right? They'll be like, the video is too slow to, and it's like, it doesn't matter, like definitively doesn't matter. And
doesn't matter on what?
Conversion rate. Because everybody says like, and there's this, I don't know where this came out, but someone's like, well, Google says for every extra second of page load time will drop your conversion rate by like 20%.
And you get a big F.
Yeah, and it's like, do you know how many of my clients would be at a 0% conversion rate when I got them?
Season 2, episode, I don't even know what episode it is, but probably one of the ones that was the most excited for, because I feel like we've had this like little secret in the back of our pocket that we've kept it there, and like if you DM'd us, you can find out our secret. And that's who we've been working with in CRO for maybe almost a year and a half, almost 2 years maybe now. You know, CRO's been a big topic, obviously, but who you work with is probably just as important as why you need to do it. And so we're super excited to bring on Ned from EndRock Software, CEO, founder, now 83 clients deep, 65 people on his team, probably one of the quietest CRO companies out there. He lets the clients do the speaking. And so this time we flipped the script and we brought Ned here to do some speaking. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, we've been, this is the first time we're actually meeting in person too. Yeah, we've been working together for, I think going on 2 years now. So, and seeing a ton of evolutions with the brand, right? I mean, tested a gazillion different things. I don't know how many hundreds of tests we've done, but it's been an awesome experience. So yeah, I mean, a little bit about myself, I have a background in statistics. I got started in this industry, frankly, by helping brands rebuild their analytics stacks. Virtually every e-commerce brand specifically that I came across was a mess. I mean, virtually no data architecture to speak of. Data governance was a foreign term. Data hygiene was always a big problem. From the very select few who actually were attempting their own analysis, a lot of type 1, type 2 errors, the classic stuff that you even learn about in just like statistics 101, right? And just any degree of data analysis. So looking at this, I'm like, these brands are at best not reading data, at worst reading faulty data and making inaccurate conclusions, and they're driving their brand like that. So I kind of built this model to just rebuild those stacks, like as even fundamental things, just doing a Google Analytics 3 at the time, just hygiene overhaul. Setting them up on a proper UTM matrices, right? So they actually had some uniformity on the traffic that was coming in. And then as I was doing it, as effectively the story goes, I kept seeing patterns, right? So I'd see, I remember one was, it was like, female iOS users were super under indexed on the add to cart rate. So I brought it to the attention of the client, thinking full well they were already aware, and it was just old news to them. And their eyes kind of lit up, and I gave them all these ideas that I thought were good, but this was pre kind of the model as it exists today. And I did this with a few different clients, and they all got really excited, like shaking in their, they're like, "This is awesome, we got to do it." Came back a month later, not one had executed on a single idea, not even moved it outside of the conference room, like it didn't progress at all. So then I'm like, okay, well, there's an execution problem here. So then I was basically asked, can I run some tests? Can I just run some experiments for you? And so I basically used their designers and their devs, and did it. We built it out. Long story short, some of the tests did really well. Some of those brands scaled really fast. Name kind of got out there, got a bunch of referrals in the beginning. And that was really the seed of what became who we are now, which was started with this analytics-centric agency and then built into this analytics and growth optimization type of shop. So that's effectively the story. We've grown organically to date. We've never done any sales, any marketing to speak of. Obviously, great clients like yourselves have referred us a number of businesses. We've grown organically, So we're just over 83, 84 clients now, and scaling, and 65, 66 people on the team. It's been a great ride. So I think to date we've run 4,000 or 5,000 experiments across e-commerce brands. So I mean, we've pretty much seen it all. Everything from the subscription optimization, basic stuff, AOV tiers, trying to understand price elasticity with customers, doing a lot of price experimentation, all the way down to more sophisticated things are some of our really biggest clients, doing a lot of predictive theory, building up predictive models, et cetera, to ultimately move repeat purchases, right? Or try to improve the CAC to LTV ratio, right? And so for our biggest clients that are doing 150 million plus a year on their site, like that's the type of work that we'll do. For the smaller guys that are sub 5 million a year, we're just basically helping them wiggle into product market fit, you know, changing message structures, optimizing headlines, optimizing sidecard experiments, optimizing AOV increases, you know, all the fundamentals. So, but yeah, that's us.
It's incredible.
Love that. I like the last thing that you just said was it's not just about optimizing for conversion rate, right? Because it almost sounds counterintuitive because CRO, right?
Yeah.
Conversion rate optimization. It almost isn't that at all. It's like business optimization, right? Like if you are carrying out a test, right? A/B test or whatever it is, you almost shouldn't be looking at just your conversion rate, right? There's so many different metrics that you should be, and this is the things that you've taught us, right? It's like, all right, cool, we had an increase in conversion rate, but what did that do to our AOV? What did it do to the revenue per session, which is ultimately the goal, right, for the business? So I think we should start off with is for brands that are kind of like getting into this or starting to like mess around with maybe A/B testing, right? When you take on a client, what is the first thing that you guys want to see or look into to understand where do you even focus on first?
Yeah, no, good point. So let me talk about the first point you brought up there, and then let's go into kind of strategically and operationally what we do. So you kind of hit the nail on the head. I've had, you know, we just actually, just this past weekend, we've had a great success story with a client based out of, there's a huge Latin American influencer. I'm not going to say her name, but we've been working on the brand for probably about 4 or 5 months. We've had a ton of growth. Just last month, they launched entire new ad campaigns targeting Venezuela, targeting Colombia, targeting Ecuador, which understandably so. This gal has a huge presence there, this and that. But as you can imagine, the CPMs are very different. The CACs are very different. The conversion rate, and just let's be honest, the price elasticity of a consumer base in Venezuela is incredibly different than in New York, right? So when you blended that new traffic in with the overall, you saw this shift, right? And this is something called the Simpsons paradox, right? Where when you start to blend in these new pockets of audience sets, you'll see the overall trend start to dip. But if you look at your original, which is like that true north organic search, top DMA US traffic, it's been on the up and up. So the CEO called me like kind of upset, like, you know, what's going on here? And then once I broke it down, you could kind of see the light bulb go off like, oh, I completely see it, right? Once you segment traffic differently, you can see conversion rates do go all over the map. So back to your point, we're big fans of per session value, right? And per session value is effectively the aggregation of average order value and conversion rate together. Now moving into the world of GA4, we're not going to be calling it PSV anymore. Now we're getting into ARPU, right? Average revenue per user. But, you know, it's kind of besides the point. But point being is you're right. You want to look at holistically, how does this change or how does this shift impact the entire landscape? And if you really want to do it accurately, you also have to look at revenue per user per window. So it's like, hey, I maybe got your AOV to go up, but at what cost? Does your propensity for you to come back and buy in 30 days go down dramatically? Because if you look at the actual contributed revenue from you as a hypothetical consumer in that first 30-day window, if I go from $100 in revenue down to 75, even though I got an AOV bump, that's a loss. So you really need to look at it from all angles. So you're absolutely right. CRO and conversion is one pillar to a much larger structure. And a lot of people look at us and they're like, oh, you're a CRO agency. And it's like, well, not really. Because like, yeah, CRO is a core concept of what we do, but we focus a ton on the repeat rate, obviously AOV patterns, even really complicated things like the viral coefficient, which gets way beyond just conversion rate optimization.
I don't even know what that is.
It's just a stupid fancy term for basically like, you know, your referral coefficient, right? Just how many people are obviously going to talk about the brand. So you look at like classic examples that had beautiful ones. Obviously SaaS platforms, you know, like the Ubers of the world are case studies to it. But in our space, you know, like the Glossiers or the Allbirds as an example. I mean, tremendous referrals there, right? Avi honestly has had a great one, right? We've always seen a ton of revenue come in tracing back from that organic word of mouth, right? I mean, that's just, and again, I'm going on a tangent here, but that's a good proxy to product market fit, is if you're getting a lot of that organic. So, and to the last thing that you said there, which is, you know, what do we do? And frankly, I think this is what differentiates us, if you're going to underline it from really any other group out there, is it's the centricity around metrics is really prevalent. It's hyper metric centric. So Still to this day, I do all the preliminary audits for every client, right? So I will dig in and I will spend a half a day going through all their analytics, and I will be looking for what I call the metrics on fire. So I'm trying to identify what is it. And so as an example, let's talk about conversion rate. Conversion rate's a super blunt metric, right? It's just a numerator denominator equation. It's just general sessions in and sessions out with a transaction. If I were to show you brand A and brand B's conversion rates and say, what are you going to do to improve it? You have no guidance there. But what if we chunk it down into the individual steps? So it's like, let's talk about homepage. How good is the homepage doing at its only job, which is to drive somebody from a landing experience into a shopping experience? That's it, right? That's it.
Right.
How about the aggregation of the product pages? It's just to get an add to cart click, right? The cart, classic example. A lot of people obsess about carts. Let's talk about it. The cart's only job beyond maybe an AOV bump is just to liaise somebody into checkout, right? It's just to shuttle them in. So it's like, now that we break it down to these individual segments, we can use intra-funnel conversion rates and start to look at a micro perspective to say, man, this brand does really well. 70% moving from people in the homepage into a shopping experience. Their add to cart rate is 17.5. By the way, average in e-com is between 12 and 18%. Unless you're fashion, then it indexes to 15 to 23. But if then you look at the cart to checkout rate and it's like 22, it's like, so you mean to tell me we had a beautiful move into product experience, great add to cart rate, and then we lose almost 80% of those new session users, right? Something's up. And then you go look at it and you'll see that they have like multi-click check, right? So it's like sidecar pops, click to checkout, a cart page appears, the redundancy factor, too many pop-ups, too many intrusive interstitials, and you're like, that's the problem right there. So then you centralize your effort around where the problematic metric is, and then you ideate there, versus a typical group will often come to the table and bring all sorts of great ideas, but they're all over the map and they're not grounded in data. As like, this is your weak point, this is where we need to focus, then we're going to move on. Yeah. So
it sounds like having a very structured hypothesis testing, analytics after that, like that entire process needs to be dialed in before really deploying.
Yeah. And not only dial in, it is the Achilles heel to all growth out there. So all the teams out there that are like, I don't get it. My CRO agency isn't getting the wins, or I don't get it. My internal team, we're not moving the needle.
Right.
I can guarantee you it's not because your designer isn't good. Even if there's QC problems, not because the developer isn't good. Sometimes the ideas are great, but if you don't have what's called that alternative hypothesis that challenges the null hypothesis with data to back it, right? As an example, and like, this is like, we ran into this with Obvi as an example, right? Where, whomever wanted to do multiple different homepage tests, right? And they were like, we're going to change the brand, And it was like, well, this isn't a metric we're challenged with right now, right? And it's like, well, let's do it anyways. Okay, we did it. And then all this, I don't know how long that took, but like we had to do the
3.5 months.
Yeah, right. You did this whole design, multiple designers. Because there was the original designer, our team put their 2 cents, and then a new designer came in and was like, no, I want to, like, I'm redoing all of this. And then after all this work, it goes live and it loses. Right? Ultimately, because we didn't have a strong hypothesis to start with. It wasn't like, okay, the homepage rate's too weak. We broke it down. We realized that it's, non-top DMA females between 25 and 34 are a weak point. Why don't we maybe just call some of them and have a conversation and be like, what's up? You represent one of our, with all due respect, weakest performing consumers. Is it the price point? Do you not believe in the brand efficacy? What is it? And we maybe, would have saved 3 months there, right?
Yeah.
So
it's true.
I think a lot of people also, there's different opinions on this part, which is testing the big things versus the small things, right? And within the big things, there's 2 types of, I guess, topics here, right? One was, I want to go a little bit more into what we did, right? Which was, again, this is more of like a brand versus even performance thing, but to give, the users context, we wanted to rebrand. We wanted to kind of update the look and feel. Ankit, right, our chief branding officer, wanted to update the look and feel of the homepage. Right. He had an idea for what he wanted it to look like, this and that. However, on our end, on the more like the performance and data side, it's performing fine.
Correct.
Right? Could we potentially, I think our theory was, could we potentially update the look and feel of the homepage? Will it attract a better user? Will maybe LTV look better? So we're looking at like further down the line, right? I think on your end, it's like, well, why fix something if it's not broken, right? So what how could we have done this better? Because I know a lot of people out there are probably maybe even considering the same thing, which is I want to test a new homepage layout. I want to test a big change to my landing page, or a split test, one version of a landing page versus another. What should we have done?
Yeah.
To get it to the point where both parties, and by both parties I mean brand versus performance, right?
Yeah.
How do we get everybody on the team aligned on, okay, well, we want to look this way. How do we actually do it properly?
Yeah, sure. So what I would say to that is we've always had an excellent homepage entry funnel rate, but here's the caveat to it, not for everyone. There are certain segments of people from specific channels, specific demographic, specific psychographic associations who don't convert well on the homepage, right? So I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but let's just say it's non-top DMA. So this is not high discretionary income Jane Doe who lives in New York City. This is lower discretionary income, I don't know, what a Mary Jo who lives in, suburbia outside Pittsburgh somewhere. They don't convert nearly as well. So what we should have done is said, hey guys, we really want to do a branding exercise. Okay, let us go dig in for a little while and try to identify the threads of whom do not successfully move from the homepage into a shopping experience, right? And let's just say it's that like suburban living, lower discretionary income. Well, then we have to start to hypothesize why. Why? Is it a price sensitivity factor, right? Maybe they're concerned on the pricing. Maybe it's they don't believe the reviews. Maybe it's the brand is too in their face, because Avia has this incredible branding where it's like pow, like you see it and it's really bright and flashy right in your face, which I think has been one of the hallmarks to its success, but that doesn't mean it works for everybody. And then we say, you know what? Maybe the branding is just too aggressive. Maybe an Ankit's point is like, okay, maybe we need to dial it back. Maybe it needs to be more modernized for this group. Well, then the last thing we should have done is pulled some qualitative data, is try to talk to people who represent that consumer demographic and try to get some actual validating points. Then at least we would have gone into the exercise with enough data. Even if it lost, at least we could have said we went in there with an empirical backing, right? And then from there could have tested against that hypothesis for that specific, and then you leading all of the acquisition in the media direction could have tried to navigate that audience to that specific landing page. So instead of being like, Obvi on the whole needs a brand facelift, which I, as you know, fundamentally do not feel it does, you wouldn't have gotten this far if it did. We would have said, well, this specific group does, this specific group. And like the classic example of this, I have a lot of clients where the male-female split is much more predominant than Obvi. Obviously, Obvi skews way, way more towards females, but I have a lot of clients where that's more split. The males are thinking very differently than the females, right? The Gen Zs are thinking very differently than the boomers. I mean, it's two completely different audiences who care about different value propositions and whose concerns are different, right? And so therefore, it's like you dig in there and then you bifurcate that audience and then you design around that versus just we kind of took a big swipe at it.
Yeah. I think brand owners almost let their ego kind of get in the way of things, where it's like, well, this is what I want it to look like. This is what I want it to do. Yeah. And that's where, how do you handle those conversations with your client, right? How do you, and even for us, like even on our team, right? It's like the way that we separate, it's like, all right, well, I'm handling this, you're handling this, it's handling this, right? It's like, how do you like get that conversation rolling where you may have a goal in mind, but you need to actually have a data-backed reason for doing that.
I think it's sometimes even bigger than that, though. Like I feel like it's what we're all like doing a lot of now. At least the minute like we're off the clock is we're starting to look at what others are doing, and like we're presenting what we think our brand should look like in our own mind, and then we're going and saying, yeah, if we do this, this should work for us too, because it's working. Like a company like Bloom Nutrition, right? Doing 9 figures in revenue. Okay, this is the homepage is working for them. If we make this, it should work for us too. Yep. Right. And it's like that piece there, the missing bridge that I think is like happening now is there is no data distinction there. It's purely all qualitative. It's all like, hey, this should work because it worked here. Even to ads at some point, right? You're like, hey, this is working. I send it to you so many times, like, hey, look at what this person's doing. You're like, yeah, but they're not getting it the right ROAS. And like the brand side doesn't do that side. There's almost no distinction to why could this work. And I feel like that is one of the things of like how, and to bridge Ash's question too, like how do you deal with those people who are like, even us, we're like, hey, we love this person's cart. We love this person's product page or collection page. And it's like, how much of it is copy paste versus like how much is it fully distinctive to the brand?
Yeah, very little is copy paste, I'll be honest. I mean, some of our biggest, take a look at the Obvi side card.
Yeah.
That's like a hallmark to the brand. Awesome tiered structure. It's got the endowed progress effect built in, which is like one of the best wins we had. It's got the subscription toggle, which was an awesome win. I can tell you, admittedly, we've tested that structure on a number of clients.
It didn't work.
On many it did. On many it did not. It just didn't. And again, it's like, so when people say to me like, well, it worked really well on Bloom or worked really well on Snow or worked really well on blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, do they have your same consumer?
Yeah.
Like point to me that is your exact consumer archetype. And then I'll listen.
Are you running the same ads?
Yeah, it's such the ecosystem. And you got to think about it. It's almost like chaos there where there's so many variables and a lot of them are exogenous that it's like you can't just bucket into, well, it works for them. And the other big factor, the other elephant in the room is, are you sure it works for them?
Yeah.
Because I've taken on some very large clients, right? That everybody would recognize if I said their name right now. And I've been like, why do you do this? And they're like, I don't know.
We don't know.
Right? And then I'm like, do you have a test that back this up? No. And then we change it and it does better.
Yeah.
Some hallmark feature, right? And so again, you can't always just blindly trust that XYZ brand has optimized that. Now, of course, it's a good place to start. Where that comes in, because by no means am I suggesting that you shouldn't look at those other brands and look at what they're doing.
Right.
But again, let's do it systemically. Let's do it procedurally. So it's like, guys, okay, it's Monday morning. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Our cart to checkout rate, guys, is sucking. What's going on? Okay, now we've narrowed it down at least to there. Okay. We've determined that it's for this reason or that reason, right? We have a price elasticity problem. Again, people are getting too sensitive to the price point. We're pushing too hard on AOV moves, et cetera. Someone says, well, I've got an idea. I know a brand that sells nutraceuticals. They seem to pertain to a female audience. They have a different strategy on AOVs. This is what they're doing. That's a great time to show that example.
Yeah.
Because here's a brand that's similar. Here's a brand that's a similar price point. Here's an area of their funnel that we don't know if they're doing well or not, but we know that we're not, and we see that they're doing some things differently. So just put it as part of the pile of ideation. Doesn't mean it gets nominated. It's just an idea. Yeah. And ideation, frankly, should be unbridled, right? So I had, like The Godfather, all of this growth stuff. Growth is a derivative of the word growth hacking, and we don't use that term anymore because it got totally bastardized, right? But that's where it ultimately came from. Growth hacking is not this like wild, like shady type of experimentation. It's the scientific method in practice.
Right.
So the Godfather to it is Sean Ellis, right? He's got the wrote Hacking Growth, et cetera. I had dinner with him, I don't know, it was a couple years ago, and I was asking him about the famous Dropbox move, right? Where they did when he was the head of growth at Dropbox, and they came up with the referral program, which was like give 25 megabytes back then, right? Yeah. Get 25 megabytes. And a lot of people credit that to their hockey stick growth right after it. And he was like, that was an intern's idea.
Wow.
And I was
That's
like,
crazy.
what?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And he was like, it wasn't insane. Even, yeah. And it was like, okay. So again, it just exemplifies and exacerbates the fact that ideation is for everybody. Right. As the owners of the company, as the brand new guy you just brought in, as your agencies, your customers, complete strangers, right? You might just show the phone to somebody who hasn't even been to your website and just be like, can you just do something? Can you just make it to checkout? And listen to what they say. And you might be like, geez, like we didn't even think of that, when they have struggles. So again, ideation should be unbridled, but then when you nominate it, that should be more procedural, that should be more scientific. So it's like, how impactful is the idea? How confident are we in it? How easy is it to do?
It's incredible.
Yeah. And then you boil it down. So again, it's not a right or wrong move to look at another brand and do it, but you got to just be scientific about it.
Tons of features are often talked about when it comes to why an app is obviously useful. Besides knowing what it can do for your business, what are the actual fundamental things it helps when it comes to the consumer itself?
So in addition to giving value to the consumers, which is number one, what we want it to do, logistically, the app converts a lot better, right? There's one-click checkout. All of our, buy now, pay laters are compatible, integrate with them. Our subscription platform integrates with them. For loyalty, we use reviews.io, and everything is able to be managed from within the app. So like I said, it's one place to give value, but two, if you're making a purchase, it's the easiest place to do it.
If you want to get started today building an app, you can get up to 2 months free with TapCard. Remember, they take care of the entire build out, so you don't have to. Get started today building an app for your brand. Now, let's get back to the episode.
One question that I have is, you talked about ideating and stuff, and obviously on a brand perspective, we have ideas that come, but from an agency perspective, we're leaning more on you, right? Organizationally, like for you guys, you have 60 odd employees, and then yourself, who's been in the weeds for so many years. How do you guys come up with these ideas, and what are you looking at, and why should we trust you?
Yeah. No, great question. So this is, this is exactly, if you were on the inside of EndRock, this is what I'm preaching is what we're going to be doing. So tomorrow morning, we have a growth lead ideation session, right? So we basically have 10 growth leads in the company. They oversee all the different clients. Everyone's going to be bringing up certain problematic metrics that they're challenged with, right? Or certain brands that they need ideation. And the first conversation everybody will ask is, what's the metric on fire? What's the weak link? What is it? Where are you sliding? And it doesn't necessarily mean a metric that in a period of time is weak, but if it's declining, as an example, right? So maybe the homepage rate's always been great, but it's been dry, for 6 weeks straight, it's been on the decline. That could, in theory, be a metric on fire too. And then at least now we all know where to look, right? So now it's not like, hey guys, I need help with Avi. Can you look at the site? That'll never be the conversation internally. It'll be, hey guys, I need help with Avi. The add to cart rate has suffered specifically on the top 3 SKUs. I've broken it down. In the organic search segment, we're not seeing any move. The paid media segment seems fine, but for whatever reason, referral and affiliates, it's declining. So now people are like, okay, referral, affiliate, add to cart rate, these 3 products. So we're already way ahead of the game at this point, because at least we're getting into specificity. And then what will happen is we have open conversation and open dialogue. And a lot of times that's where the benefit of a group like us is, one of my GLs might be like, we just had a similar problem over on XYZ, and this is what won. And then that will spawn, like Alex's ideation, as he'll go, okay, I see what you did. Okay, that's interesting, right? So this is where we can use the benefit of frankly having so many clients and such a large repository of historical tests that
almost building your own AI internally
in a way, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that's what we do. If we really get into a jam and we really can't figure it out, we'll start talking to strangers. I know that sounds crazy, but literally I can't tell you how many times that saved us, where we're like, I don't know. I mean, I don't see any reason why it doesn't.
What do you mean stranger?
I'll use my mom as an example, right?
Literally friends and family.
Yeah, friends or family or this and that, or just, whoever. Like somebody that has no affiliation, you know what I mean? Like my mom knows the Avi site by now, but like hypothetically, if she didn't, I just hand it to her. I've been like, hey, go buy the product you want. And I'll just listen to her, and she's 69 years old. And, this damn doesn't work. I can't even read. And you'll hear her say things, and I'm like, all right. I'm seeing
talk a little bit more about that. I'm interested. Like, how does that conversation help? Because if for brands out there that obviously smaller brands that may not be able to get to an agency level, right? Literally sending your website to maybe your parents or like your neighbor or whatever it is. What do you look for out of that conversation?
Just listen to them. And ask them to speak out loud, and don't give them 5 minutes. What's your session duration? Minute and a half, 2 minutes, time them. And just tell them to be like, hey, go buy a product. I mean, you don't have to go all the way through purchase, but go buy a product. The amount of pop-ups I've watched my mother struggle with and I'm looking at it, and she's like, and then she'll tap and she'll rage click, like you can pick up on any heat mapping tool. And then you'll watch the frustration, literally and figuratively, just start to rise, right? And you'll see the frustration, and that can really be helpful. You just listen to how people go through. And again, this is kind of a last resort one that we'll do if we're really just like, we can't figure it out. And oftentimes that can be a really excellent exercise to find some findings. But I mean, back to your point, I mean, that's basically it is we're so data centric, we're probably going to find it before anyone else. We've got a huge repository of tests that have worked, and we've got these other like little side tactics, like the stranger tactic, et cetera.
Like that. If you had to finish a sentence, if your CRO team isn't doing this, what would it be? What should someone look out for as a red flag?
Sure. Yeah, easy. If your CRO team isn't starting every conversation with data they found, that's a red flag. And I have a client, we were speaking about before the conversation started here, who just brought a CRO internal one to basically interface with us directly. I guess he didn't want his head of e-com or whomever to do it anymore. He wanted a specific one. She's really good at designing. I'll be honest, her designs are awesome, right? And I don't dislike a lot of her ideas. A lot of them are good ideas, but there hasn't been 1 ounce. And I just kind of wanted to watch and see. you know? And I tried, because I didn't want to ruffle feathers. So I kind of like respectively on one of our last calls tried to just bring it back down to earth to be like, these are good ideas, but like not one of these pertains to the metric that matters right now. So again, it's like, if your CRO agency isn't starting conversations with data and not just like, hey man, here's where our conversion rate's at. No, it should be like, hey, I spent some time and here's what I found. For whatever reason, our female iOS users are super under-indexed on add to cart rate. You know, under-indexed meaning like the proportion of revenue as a proportion of add to cart or product page visits is vastly skewed compared to males in that example. And here's what I think it is. And I created a few custom segments in GA, and this is what I found. Here's what it's not. Here's what I've disproved, right? And I think it's this. If you're not having those types of conversations with your CRO agency, that means they are an ideation shop and they're a design shop.
Yeah.
And that you're gonna miss the mark. They might occasionally get a good win, just happenstance. But if it's not data centric, you're missing the mark.
It's great. It's really good.
I want to talk a little bit more about what you just mentioned, right? So if you're trying to find or fix an issue within a certain audience, right? That's which is under indexing, right?
Yep.
If you fix the problem for that audience and it affects another audience, does that happen?
Whack-a-mole every day,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then,
it keeps us in business. There's always new metrics popping up. Yeah.
So how do you like, I guess, how do you address that, right? Because what if, you know, you make the change, at the end of the day, we're really looking at like revenue per session. If it goes up, great, we're happy.
Yeah.
But is that the right way to look at it? If one audience suffers, if another one does better? Like,
yeah, and I made it incorrectly sound like it's a zero-sum game where it's like, oh, okay, if this segment wins, that's only because this segment has to lose, right? So the sum total of the parts can only equal some finite number. It's not that,
right?
You're right. So, but it is whack-a-mole, and that the moment you optimize one metric, it's never smooth sailing. There's always some other metric rears its ugly head, and it's usually because, like, you know, like for instance, like our biggest client does around 200 million a year on their website, right? So I mean, it's a pretty substantial brand.
Sure.
So a lot of people are like, well, how old's the brand? It's 20 something years. They've been around forever, right? And it's like, well, how do you optimize this brand that's had army of people overseeing it for 20 years? And the answer is you just peel the layers back. So it's not like, oh, we're gonna do this new add to cart test. Again, it's like, we're gonna be looking at males in any West Coast city, for whatever reason they're underperforming, shopping this specific collection who came from this query. And that's what we're focusing on. So you just go deeper, deeper, deeper. And the deeper you go, doesn't matter if you're Uber, or doesn't matter if you're Obvi, or if you're just getting off the ground, right? You are gonna find metrics, right? Now, the smaller you are, the more surface level they are, the bigger you are, the deeper you have to dig. By the way, coming full circle to why most CR groups can't hang with really big companies. Because most big companies are like, we tried that idea, right? Because if you don't have the data chops to really dig under the surface, you're just going to be floundering, you know?
Got it. Makes sense. I want to transition a little bit into, so maybe like tactical testing, at least for me, right? On the paid side, say a good amount of users who, or viewers who watch the podcast, media buyers, this and that, brand owners. For me, right, we've done a lot of tests on the landing page, headlines, image testing, you know, buy box optimizations. One of the biggest things that I really like to do, and I think it's a little not controversial, but I think a lot of people do give it pushback, is the big test, right? Should I literally take my landing page version 1 and create an entirely different version and test those two against each other and see what gives me the best revenue per session, right? Is that the wrong way to do things? Is there a place for that? Or should brands really just say, hey, here's my baseline, let me start making adjustments on this page? And how do you even go about doing that?
Sure. Let's go back to that example. You got one landing page, and as just to use your words, I want to completely change and try a V2. All right, what's your hypothesis?
That a different structure in landing page could yield a better conversion rate.
Fair. So what's the data to show that the structure on the former page was faltering?
I'm not hitting my CAC goal.
Right. So it could be a function of what images we show, the copy, the CTA placement, what the CTA is, color conversion optimization, any tenet of behavioral, it could be any one of those things. So the likelihood that just doing a second design without pinpointing specifically, at least what we think in the interim it is unlikely to win. Right. So again, just trying to put the odds in your favor. So I only share that to say it was very much what you said, the latter, which is go in a more tactful, or be more sorry, I'm blanking on the word, be more strategic and go smaller.
Got it.
Consistently, every one of my clients, I should say, like literally every single one who did a rebrand saw the rates go down after they launched. Every single, to the point where I'm just like pleading with them, like, please don't do it. Yeah, please. They spend ungodly amounts of money with these huge branding agency, and they get, I mean, half of them got out of their contracts halfway through because it got so expensive. And they redo the logo and they redo the color schema and the fonts, and everybody gets excited, and there's this huge thing, and then they launch and the 3.2 goes to 2.8, and it's just like, why did we do that? And here's the worst part, we don't know why. You don't know what is it, where in the site caused the dip. Nobody knows. So that's my other thing, is it is faster, less expensive, way less of a headache, and infinite more learnings when you go piece by piece. So if you really, really are keen to do this big overhaul, this big change, go piece by piece. So let's start, as an example, with navigation. People don't spend nearly enough time on navigation. I've done a ton of studies on like what brand new users do on a website. The reality is like less than 10% of them will make it much more than one full frame below the fold. They just live at the top. And about 70 to 80%, their first engagement click will be the hamburger menu on mobile. And about 20% will be the primary hero CTA, which leaves all the other CTAs combined to make up like maybe 5%. It's
crazy.
And you see so many brands
are
like,
the inverse amount of time.
Yeah, they'll be like, well, let's move this content block or let's change it. And it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like that nobody's going down there, right? So it's like, let's just start at the top. You can spend a lot of time trying to optimize the navigation process. Here's a down and dirty one for anyone who's watching. Go on your site right now, go on mobile. How many clicks does it take on mobile to get to a collection page going via the hamburger menu? If the answer is more than 3, you've immediately got a problem. So meaning if you have to click the hamburger menu to open it, click another one like all products, and then there's a drop down, click on like women's dresses, and then you have to get to another one, that's too many. There's an inverse relationship definitively in any digital funnel with number of clicks and conversion rate. So right there, you've got to win. Consolidate and make that tighter. So yeah.
Where do people, what about on the flip side of people who are maybe who have a brand but are trying to rebuild, okay, or are trying to build a new landing page, or are trying to think of, all right, maybe my site isn't converting, and I need to start somewhere, or certain building blocks, right? Or if you were to start a brand today, right? What are some of the tools or resources you would use as a baseline out there to say, all right, this is how I'm going to build this brand or this website or this landing page? What would you use?
Well, I'd go really analog with it if I were to start a brand right now, and I would just
and is that because of today's market, or just in general because of what you
this is just my what I believe, and I'm robbing this from one of the Y Combinator guys, who I think he said like he said to one of the cohorts, like, your only job this summer, and I could be butchering this, excuse me, but I think he said like is to build product and call customers, or talk to your customers. I think it was build product and talk to your customers. Truer words have never been spoken. So in the early days, just refine your product itself and talk to your customers as much as you can, and just understand that, because all that you're after in the beginning is product market fit. Right. Avi's in a very different boat. This is where you guys were a few years ago, but you're in scalability now, right? You're in how do we tap into these now like ancillary audience types that live right next or have lines of affinity, right, to our main audience types. But if I were early stage looking at it, I mean, the tools I would use are super analog, man. I'd get the most basic page up I could with the most fundamental value proposition. Great display of the product. Imagery is critical. It is way more important than any like logo design or the fonts that you use or even the template layout of your site. Imagery is critical, and I would just nonstop talk to my customers.
So if you're stuck or starting off, you would just start there. Get to figure out.
I mean, there's the recent example. I think one of the brands you introduced me to, It's a sports nutrition brand. I took their site. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to offend them, but I saw their site and I'm like, oh, this is a disaster. And I'm looking at their GA and it's like a 7.2% conversion rate on like millions in revenue.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. So I even talked to the guy and I'm like, I think something's wrong with your analytics setup. I'm like, there's no way. Yeah. So I talked to him and he kept saying, he's like, oh, we have really loyal customers. A buddy of mine where I live in Miami, who lives near me, is really big in the retail side of sports nutrition. And I called him, I'm like, have you ever heard of this company? He goes, dude, it's one of my best sellers. And he started listening and he gave me a 30-minute pitch without me getting a word in. Without getting a word in about the unique factors of what they've built out. And he's talking to me about, he's like, they got this one peanut butter product. He's like, but it doesn't increase your triglycerides and da-da-da-da. He's pitching me on. And I was like, dude, I'm buying this stuff. This is awesome. So it just goes to show the quality of that product, of that brand is so good and it works. And like, Avi, look at some of the case studies you guys have had. Forget all the CRO stuff. Even without all of us, and this is not a pitch to ditch us, but without all of us, you have enough traction and product market fit and the product is good enough that like you're going to keep growing just on that. Everything that we do, everything that you're doing on the media side, that's just an accelerant. Yep. But the fundamental is the quality of that product, right? So honestly, I wouldn't waste a dime early stages on people like us. If you're sub 100,000 in revenue, right? If you're doing like 10K a month as an example, I would spend every ounce of effort you have on calling your customers and just trying to learn and get a better product out there. People like us will help you accelerate and put the gas pedal down once you've nailed that.
A lot of people don't know this, but Ned is featured in a Harvard case study.
Yep.
And I think this is probably a hot take because what you kind of, I guess, glorified through that was something that people don't really believe in, which is the site speed stuff. So I'll let you explain it.
Yep.
And I think Ash is probably going to be on your side with this because he's also been like, dude, it doesn't make a big difference. But what is that case study about and why is it such a big polarizing discussion for people?
Yeah, sure. So a little backstory. I was approached by two professors at HBS at Harvard Business School and one from UPenn. And another one, I forget, I apologize, the university she came from. And they approached me because they were introduced via an investor of one of my biggest and longest standing clients and said, originally they came to me and they just said, look, we need access to a group of sites with permission that we're trying to do these measurements and this and that. And we're ultimately trying to determine the correlation between site speed and latency and conversion rate. And I somehow was able to pitch them to allow me in and to like contribute. So I think we had bi-weekly calls for about a year and we went through it and I did a lot of analysis with them. There was a lot of really heavy regression analyses were done, this and that. Without getting into it, the published paper, which I can share. Actually, you have the link to it, but I can share it with whomever.
Pull it up here.
It basically came to this conclusion, right? And I'm going to summarize it down. Is when you have slow contentful paint, right? As an example, if I go to Avi right now, and I've never been there, and the homepage is a little slow to load, or the image is below the folder a little slow to load, it actually has, from a correlation perspective, zero impact. And everybody obsesses about this constantly, right? They'll be like, the video is too slow to, and it's like, it doesn't matter, like definitively doesn't matter. And
doesn't matter on what?
Conversion rate. Because everybody says like, and there's this, I don't know where this came out, but someone's like, well, Google says for every extra second of page load time will drop your conversion rate by like 20%.
And you get a big F.
Yeah, and it's like, do you know how many of my clients would be at a 0% conversion rate when I got them? And they're not, they're at like a 3 to 4. So I'm sorry, it's not related to contentful paint. Part of this is because there's an exogenous factor that no one considers, which is curiosity. Mm-hmm. So when I go to Avi for the first time, what's probably happened? I saw one of his ads, you got my attention. So I'm already like, oh, what is this? I'm already thinking about a problem solution. If the homepage is a little slow to load, do you think I'm really gonna bail? There's no way, because I'm already got a curiosity factor. Now, if you're deep funnel and there's latency on JavaScript, i.e. I've already liked the product, I've added to cart, and now I'm trying to toggle the subscription and that's slow or doesn't work, or the side cart won't open and I start rage clicking,
you're annoyed.
That's the kiss of death. So when you talk about site speed, you've got to compartmentalize it down. If it's something like latency on JavaScript, deep funnel, that's gonna absolutely hurt you. But if your homepage image is a little slow to load, don't fret. And I've seen teams tear each other apart over this, right? And it's like, we have a 67% score on GT metrics. It's like, yeah, you're fine. Yeah, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. You know?
Yeah.
Is there a certain level of which, like, so for example, like you said, you literally say you're scrolling on Instagram, you saw an Avi ad, you click it, and like just nothing is loading, right?
Well,
That's
not,
no, but here's my argument is that you're just like your internet's probably bad, or you're like just on the road and you have no service.
Yeah.
You're not gonna load anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're in that position, like that, no matter what you fix on the website, it's not gonna fix that.
Yeah. Well,
And that's where I get annoyed at people, because it's like, yeah, but like I gotta use this app to like I gotta go headless. I gotta go to, like, you really don't.
No,
You really don't.
You,
Like,
you don't go to headless for speed. You go to headless, in my opinion, for malleability. I've got one of my favorite clients on our roster is headless, and with the things we can do, it's just like, I've never once heard the devs be like, oh, you can't do it. They're like, yeah, no problem, right? I mean, there's no apps holding you back. There's no template structure holding you back. There's no, spaghetti code. They've done a brilliant job there, and they can, really.
Apps versus custom build.
Custom build.
Always?
Well, okay. That was a really quick answer. We always custom build, yes, because apps are weights that really slow down things like latency. As an example, like you've probably seen this. You go to a website and you go to their PDP and you're ready to hit add to cart, and like after 5 seconds, 10 seconds, then the subscription box appears. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that was like that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. That'll really kill you. So I'm a big fan of custom builds. Big app architectures and big app ecosystems are, in my opinion, really not great. All that being said, if you're brand new to the game, that's the point of apps, is lean on them, right? If you're Avi, try to peel off. If you are, baby Avi back years ago, yeah, why not? You probably don't have the capital, most likely, to engage big teams anyways, so lean on apps,
That makes sense.
Well, what if the apps affect the homepage? Homepage load, this and that.
It depends, right? So again, if it's going to create a little latency on like an image to load, I don't have a problem with that. Mm-hmm. But again, in the PDP itself, if the subscription toggle and widgets aren't even appearing for 5 to 10 seconds, you literally have people who add to cart and never even knew you offer subscription. That's obviously problematic, right? So. I mean, again, in this space, there's really no like binary black and white answer to these things. But generally speaking, there's a huge misconception about site speed and performance.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think the only thing that I would have to say is, and you tell me what your thoughts are here, landing pages, at least for paid, that to me, it's like when I had half a second to get somebody to stop from scrolling. Yeah. And then click learn more. Right. I don't want to waste any more of their time. So fundamentally, if my landing page is as fast as possible, then that's fine. Right. But I agree, like the homepage stuff, like if I'm going to Google the brand and I'm going to their website, like I'm there for a reason. I'll stick around if it's slightly slower.
Yeah, right. Because you got a curiosity factor.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
Totally do.
Nobody come for me on that. Like, landing pages need to be fast. There's a reason for it.
Yeah. But landing pages also have this other huge benefit too, which they're super concise. Yeah. Right. They're very often just like, hey, you're here. Great.
Hard to make. That
yeah. They're like, you're here. Here's the pitch. Here's the cost. Here's all the things you're gonna get. Do you want it? And like, you think about a typical site structure. It's like, well, let's ease them into the brand. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that inherently comes with what? More clicks. Right. You have to go down a deeper path, and that comes with a natural attrition.
So you talked about site speed as probably a little bit of a myth hack or a myth buster, but maybe one or two other ones that would maybe like be a head scratcher that you've seen be generalized as a very obvious answer, but just years of perfecting this data and statistic piece has made you realize otherwise?
Free shipping thresholds.
Interesting.
Yeah, free shipping thresholds. So two examples I'll give of that is one client is a high-end female fashion brand with an AOV of about $350. They had a free shipping threshold of $75, I want to say it was, maybe $90, this and that. And had it for years. So we did an analysis and created deciles of where all the customers lined up and basically created a distribution curve. And what we found is it was like 4% of customers were coming in sub that number. So we proposed to them, just say free shipping, right? The amount of money that you lose on the 4% will be offset tremendously by the psychology of when I land on this website and immediately see free shipping. And that's exactly what happened. is the 4% still happened and they had to subsidize that shipping cost. Loss. However, the average conversion rate went up like 18 basis points, or no, I'm sorry, went up, 18 basis points, something like that, which for the amount of revenue they do, I don't know, 60, 70 million a year was dramatic, right? Yeah. It was, put it this way, for every $10,000 in losses shipping, they made, something like 50,000 in net new revenue. So you got to think through the psychology of the free shipping. And most people are just like, I don't want to pay for anyone shipping. It's like, but in their case, unless the free shipping threshold was in the hundreds, it didn't make any sense to have.
Right.
Another brand that you and I are both very close with had free shipping where they put it at $50. But the problem is again, if you did an add to cart, a true add to cart analysis to say not purchase, but what products are added to cart the most, the average price point was $49.99. So think about that. You add $49.99 to your cart and you open the cart and what does the bar say?
1 cent.
You're 1 cent away from free shipping, which is the most pedantic thing ever. Like, wouldn't that irritate you? Yeah. It irritates me just talking about it. So we just dropped it to $49 as an example and immediately unlocked revenue. So you got to be very careful with free shipping thresholds and do the analysis. Do a distribution curve. Actually understand where your quartiles and your deciles
just round
are.
up the number.
Yeah, don't just pick a number that just because it looks good. Or go to some other brand and I'm like, well, they do $50 free shipping. That sounds nice to us. Yeah.
Like, don't listen to your brand guy.
But again, it's back to the data. Do the math, right? And figure it out and determine where it is.
Yeah.
And if you really want to get tricky with it, then you can start to create standard deviation models, this and that, and then you can start to personalize different thresholds. So you can even move thresholds and you can move free gift thresholds based on what items people added to cart. Like this gets into more tricky things, right? But you can move the needle a little bit and you can, again, because it's behavioral psychology at the end of the day.
So we've been working with you for, I think 2+ years now, right? Hundreds of tests. And we've probably talked a little bit about it like on Twitter, but not, fully in depth. So I think talking about some of our maybe like top 3, like most impactful tests that we've ran, that you think maybe other people might be able to try. I think that might be cool.
Sure. Well, we were just talking about free shipping bits. So like, let's talk about one in particular. So Avi's got an excellent gamification tiered bar on its sidecar, right? So anyone can go see this right now. One of the things that existed before is when you got free shipping, as an example, or when you guys were like, basically when you surpassed that, the highlight, because so many people were getting it, wasn't really that demonstrative, right? It was mainly about, here's what you'll get if you add more. But there's this concept called the endowed progress effect, which was made famous by car washes back in the day. So remember, like back in the day, you used to get that little card, and then you get like 10 stamps on it or whatever, and you get a free car wash, right? Some enterprising individual had the idea to start handing out cards that already had the first one stamped. And what they found is that the audience who got one that already had one stamp dramatically outperformed the base who didn't. So it became the endowed progress effect, which is basically this concept that like, if you kind of almost like get them on the way or you celebrate the fact that they've already earned something, the propensity for them to continue down that path goes up dramatically. So the idea there was a very simple one, but it was basically this celebration visually, if you will, of like, you've unlocked free shipping. Like, this is great. Like, good for you. You've unlocked free shipping. And when you celebrate that, because a lot of brands will be like, well, we give free shipping to everybody. I don't care. Celebrate it. Like, doesn't matter. Even if it's free shipping for all orders, when you open the sidecar, be like, you've unlocked free shipping. No customer is going to feel bad about that. And it has this really, but it has this really interesting impact where very often what you'll see, and you'll notice it if you watch the cart to checkout rate, is you'll see that'll be your first leading indicators. You'll see that go up. So that was a fun win. I know that we had.
That's an easy one for brands to do that.
It totally is.
If you're already offering free shipping, basically celebrate it.
Yeah, celebrate it, right. You cannot, I mean, and by the way, that's like, you're subsidizing their costs. Like, be like, hey, as a reminder, we're paying for it. Do it in checkout. Do it everywhere. Another one that I love, one of my all-time favorite ones with Avi was the...
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Was there any stats around that test that you remember?
Oh, yeah. Ultimately, that produced just under a 15% lift on your cart to checkout rate. right? Which is a pretty demonstrable, given the traffic that you guys drive, that's a pretty demonstrable
Not too
lift. Yeah, and that was, by the way, that was specific, just to clarify, that was for only net new users, brand new users. Repeat users, we didn't find the effect to be nearly as large. Yeah. But it makes perfect sense. Why would a repeat user not be as impacted by it? They already know. They already celebrated it a month ago when they bought for the first time. So again, when I talk about these lifts, usually it's like the mobile segment. It's not like, oh my God, the whole audience. But it's still, I mean, given how much traffic you guys drive, no, that was substantial. My favorite one I think we've ever had with Avi was the subscription optimization series of tests. And so one of them is the toggle with the check marks and the default with the auto ship. So there's a number of things that happen
put it
here.
up, if we can overlay it.
What virtually every brand does is, what do they do? The radio buttons.
Yeah.
Right. So it'll be one time versus subscribe, and you have to click this and that.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that Avi has now is, number one, it has a toggle, and number two, it defaults to auto ship, and number three, and the most important thing that we learned, and we've tested this, by the way, on a bunch of other brands and found wins with it. You guys were the first one that we did it with, is it'll highlight all the things that you get, right? So, the free shipping, if you subscribe, you get the 15% off, and it'll do it with these green check marks. That's your experience when you land on the PDP. If you so choose as a user to say, I don't want to subscribe, and you toggle it off, what happens? They turn to red X's. Right. So we take it away from you. And that's the key. Because based on the basic tenets of behavioral psychology, the pain of loss will always supersede the benefit of perceived gain.
That's a clip.
So in other words, when you give something to somebody, or they start on a job and you're like, here's your bonus waiting for you, but we're going to start taking it away with every F up. That's like literally scientifically is much more powerful than, if you do well, there's a bonus at the end of the table, right? Yeah. So what we learned by that is that little element actually had a major impact on the psychology of people. And so we started, again, highlighting all the things you get with subscription, and it's cool if you want a one-time, but we're just going to highlight all the things we take away by doing that. And that, combined with the moving to the word auto ship versus subscription, with the toggle and just that restructure that we did, you guys had it was a 49% lift on the per session value of new subscribers. Yeah. So that's a function of conversion rate and AOV, again, for brand new subscribers. That was one of our best, and we use it as a case study internally, right? We pitch it to a lot of brands. Yeah. So, I
mean, that was, I remember Gina calling us from Stay, right? She was like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you guys doing for subscriptions? I was like, I'm driving, like on landing pages, like I'm just driving one-time purchases, right? But you guys killed it. Like on the product page is optimized, on the checkout, on the cart, right? We also had the toggle, right? So if you added something to cart and it wasn't a subscription, you were like, well, if you want to save an extra 15%, just hit this, and it turns into a subscription. Yeah. Subscriptions, man. Yeah. It changes the business substantially.
Yeah, totally. They really do. Yeah. And a lot of clients will push back on it, and it can make a huge difference. But subscriptions, another, just as to digress for one quick second, subscription is very much a function of who your audience type is. So there's I have a couple clients out there whose products seem very subscribable, who even struggle, even with all these fancy things that we do, still struggle with it because their audience just isn't that archetype, and that's okay. That's okay. I've got another one that the product is debatable, to be honest, if it's subscribable, and they have I think it's 70-something% of their customers are subscribers. Wow. It's crazy how many people subscribe. Yeah, it's insane. So
the one thing you actually told us, which is I actually was very hesitant about, was defaulting the subscription on at all times. I figured that was going to hurt conversion rate. Why even do it? And you guys found out that it doesn't do anything.
Well, so let's talk about that. You've got a few different groups of people who come in. You've got the people who already would have subscribed. They're in this bucket. We're good with them. You've got the people who, come hell or high water, are not subscribing. Right. They're going to toggle it off. Like, it's not hard to do. It's right there, right? What you worry about is that gray area, that middle segment of people who, the classic, well, I didn't know I was subscribing. So the reality is, those people who are going to complain no matter what, they'll write in and say, hey, I didn't know I was subscribing. We're sorry, our bad, we'll cancel your subscription right away, whatever, this and that, that's fine. But what you'll have is the majority of that gray area people will just let it ride for at least 2, sometimes 3 subscriptions. Right. And so very often, like I've had a couple experiences with products just personally where I'm like, this product's awesome, but I'm like you guys, I'm just super bit and I just forget. I just forget, and I kind of wish I had subscribed to begin with, just because then I have to be like, put it on my massive to-do list, which is like go buy blah, 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 blah again, whatever. And I'm just like, this is a pain to even have to think about it and write it down and do it. So don't cut yourself short. Like a lot of the folks listening to this, you got an awesome product. Don't think for a second that people aren't going to fall in love with it on the first attempt and will be pleased with the fact that you already opted them in, despite if they were like, oh, I didn't realize that was what I was doing. And then net, frankly, when you factor in even the complaints and even the few returns, almost always, not 100% of the time, but almost always you'll find the net gain is always positive and like measurably positive, you know, like double digit positive. Yeah.
So if you have subscriptions, auto enroll, have that option to be auto enrolled.
Yeah.
That's it.
And then celebrate and highlight all the awesome stuff they're going to get. Let them toggle it off and take all that away visually.
I think it's really cool because I was at a conference this past week called Sub Summit, which was all about subscriptions and whatnot. And I was on a panel, and it was interesting because on the panel, obviously people ask you questions. One of the questions was why is the reason you guys chose auto ship instead of subscribe and save is because you don't want a more discounted oriented person to just learn that the only way they're saving money is to subscribe. And is it also to like change the sterile environment of everything is subscribe and save and auto ship? And I'm like, that's not really even how it was presented to us. That's like great because if you think about it too, like the perspective of like everyone has this one behavioral way to shop. And like sometimes it's even changing like the acronym or go to thesaurus and change the wording can have such a behavioral impact. And like, oh, this is auto ship, meaning like I definitely need this, but they'll just send it to me automatically. Not so much like I need this, because I'm gonna get a discount. And like that is that's one word that changed from a phrase to a word that changed that impact.
It did. It was a nice lift from that one. Yeah. That's cool. That wasn't our hypothesis as to why that would work. So I know.
And when that question was posed, I obviously at the point I was like, definitely was our intention.
Like, that's what I was thinking. But that's awesome.
Super cool.
That's awesome. That's really, it's intriguing. That could be one of the reasons why. Right. And by the way, as a student of this whole game, it's like, I can't sit here and be like, oh, this one because of definitively that. A lot of times it's this is, again, what I think is the reason why, and we're always trying to learn. So that's an example of maybe why that did so well. We have our own theories, but
Email or phone number? What would you collect if you only could collect one?
If I wanted to collect one?
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably going to hate this answer, but it depends on the brand. It depends on the brand. Frankly, the only way I could answer that is to dig into the brand and look at the performance of initial touch point on SMS versus email and try to determine who's got the best LTV and go from there. I don't have it's brand specific, you know.
So you've seen where some brands do just thrive off of email versus phone number.
And one example, I saw one brand that did excellent. We had tremendous conversion rates on SMS opt-in. But if you didn't act on the first SMS, which came day one, and then I think they sent 3 or 4 in your first week, by the time you got to the 3rd or 4th one, if you didn't convert, the unsubscribe rates were horrendous and you pretty much never came back. So the winning variation with them was pushed them into SMS and email. Only started with SMS for first. If you didn't buy, we'd let one more day go by, try another SMS. At that point, you're out. We're not SMSing you, and then it converts to email.
Incredible.
So it was SMS 1, 24 hours later, SMS 2. If that didn't work, you're off the SMS list. Now you're in email, which is much less invasive.
Save a ton of money.
Yeah, you would, right? Tons. But again, so it just depends. It just depends.
I just have one more question, which is more on like just you as a personality, right? Like I think it's easy for both Ash and I, like whether we're on Mentor Pass calls or we meet a founder or something, and usually step one of like, hey, what should I do next? Like, I think it's very easy for us to be like, you have to meet EndRock, right? Now, like whether or not you work with them, go and at least get an audit done because like, it's inspirational when they come back to us and like, dude, I just met Ned. And he's like, he's a fucking genius, right? And it's like, that part is great, but like, I think it'd be really cool to just understand like managing 80 plus clients now, building what you have, but still having such a good ear to the ground with your clients. You know, you're on calls, you're talking to everyone, you know about the smallest client, you know about the largest, and there's a wide spectrum in between. What's your routine like? Are you just like, are you working 20 hours a day? Is this all you live and breathe? Or like, how are you maintaining this kind of ecosystem in your own habitat?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's kind of an obsession. I'll be honest, like you guys. I mean, I usually 70 minimum hour weeks, to be honest. Yeah, I do my audits on the weekends. You guys probably know, right? I mean, it's the only time. So my thing is, and if I talk to any brand, it's like, I'll get your GA access if you're willing to give it, and then I'll use my Saturday or Sunday to do it. It's the only time I can actually dig in and think through the data and be like, what is going on here, without 900 Slack dings coming out and text messages and phone calls and hey, we've got a challenge, or hey, this client wants to chat about this. You know, I mean, during the day, it's just it's impossible to do those things. But I love it, man. I really do. I know it's super cliche to say, but I love the pattern discovery. It's so cool. It's like a little treasure hunt, you know, to find these things and then to test it. And I think one of my kind of like banner moments is I have a really big fashion client, a household name, and I was we were testing different CTAs, so different call to actions, right? And I was in New York Times. I'm sorry, what am I saying? I was in Times Square, New York Times, in New York. I was in Times Square in New York, and I don't know what I was doing. I was just passing through there, and they had this huge billboard, and it had our CTA on there.
No way.
And I was like, and I know it was like a small thing, but I'm like, dude, that is so
that's powerful.
Cool. The impact
chills,
you're making, you know what I mean? And it sounds, you know, a little cliche again to say, but I love discovering those things. I love getting into the client's data. Frankly, I love the fact that very few people seem to know how to do this for whatever reason. I thought this was like a really clear and obvious thing, but I guess it isn't. And so it's really fun digging in with some big brands who call you and they're like, this is like such a breath of fresh air for someone to actually bring empirical ideology to the table.
If your CRO agency doesn't work on weekends, you need to switch.
But I just love it, man. It's a lot of fun. Or clients will be like, you know, our metrics are down or this and that. And you can really dig in and find the problem and solve it. And then the rates go back up. It's just, you save the day.
True.
You know, and it's just that part's a lot of fun. So I love it. But yeah, my day is, I'm a really rigid person, to be honest. So up early, gym every morning. I only lift. And so I don't, for whatever reason, that really helps me personally and mentally and such. And then I'll get usually on Slack and working by about 7:30. And then I'll usually go straight till about 7 to 8, somewhere between there. I try to just take meals on the calls, right? So just eat so you don't have any interruption. I have a whole...
Just keep muting, right? Each bite.
Yeah, I've gotten very good at that when the fork hits the plate, this and that. But everything's already prepped. The meal's all prepped ahead of time, so I don't have to break none of this leave for lunch stuff, because that'll really kill you in the long run. It really does. You really got to be careful with that. I know we're going on a tangent here. But, and then, you know, dinner at night, try to debrief this and that, and then I'll try to study something new. And I try to take Friday nights off and as much as Saturday as I can, but you know how it is. It's just like, it's always pulling at you.
Here and there.
Yeah. So,
it's incredible.
But I love it. I got a great support system around me, and yeah, man, I love it.
Yeah. So at the end of every episode, we like to do something to chew on, right? So I know we talked about a lot. All the insights have been absolutely incredible. But for people who are watching or listening, what is one thing you want somebody to take away from everything that you've kind of spoke about to chew on?
Understand your data. Understand what your data is telling you. All the answers are in your data. It's right in front of you. You just got to know how to read it, or leverage a group like ourselves eventually to show you how to read it and to give you some answers. And it'll save you so much time and money from focusing on the wrong things.
Love that.
Chew on that.
Chew on that.
So for those of you who have enjoyed this episode, I know we have tons and tons of founders who watch this, and you know, we've made some sly remarks at the fact that if your CRO agency doesn't do this or that, use EndRock. But the fact of the matter is, EndRock is at a certain size where, you know, they're not taking everything and everyone on. But at the same point, we've had the honor to have Ned here. So if any of you founders or brand owners are interested to work with EndRock, reach out to Chew on this. You can DM us, you can message us, you can comment below, or you can email us. You guys know Ash and I, and reach out and we'll connect you to Ned, and maybe you'll even throw in an audit with that.
Yeah, recommend the audits. They're robust. They're about 20 pages, so it'll at worst case, it'll give you informational, and super directional document.
If you want more from us, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, and check out the website chewonthis.io.